This is, of course, the Nickel Talk About Anything podcast, and I had a lot of fun today with my friend Beth Aker as we recorded in studio. Of course, she's the director of East Pasco Meals on Wheels. It serves, I believe it's like 160 meals a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year to our citizens, giving them a human touch and a home-cooked hot meal. And she also has recently expanded their outreach to the Genesis Community Center. Through this organization, altogether, they serve not only these residents, but also 14 other food pantries around the community. The biggest takeaway that you might get today is that regardless of your vocation, your experience, your education, you can work to be somebody that makes a change and brings a difference to your community. So sit back and listen, and I'd love to hear from you. Email me at talkwithnickaboutatanything@gmail.com.
So you were saying, though, that you fell asleep during the hypnosis.
I did. I was so
What were you getting hypnotized for?
Well, can I say this on live air? Because I'm fat.
Okay.
So I sought out this hypnotist, and she is helping me work through my fatness.
So like just eating
Healthy, eating better.
Habits, eating
well,
things.
actually, I'm a greedy
So all that.
eater. So
Yeah.
if I have something and I like it, I don't share.
Yeah.
And I eat the whole thing.
So this is the Nickel Talk About Anything podcast. I have a guest here in the studio with me today, Beth Aker from Meals on Wheels. And
Hi, everybody.
yeah, so Beth, welcome here.
Thank you. I love your new facility.
Hey, it's kind of fun. I won't tell anybody the size of it, but if it looks small, it is small. But you know what?
It's vast, and the ceiling is very high. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very open.
I think the shed almost killed me once, actually, when I was getting ready for this. It was just storage in here. This is a shed is all this is, and there was stuff stored in here from me, from the previous people that lived here, and I said one day, I'm like, I'm going to clean this out, and I don't even think I had a plan why at that point. It was last fall, or like October, November, something like that, and I think it was on a Sunday afternoon and evening. I just decided to do that. And the next day I was really sick, and I ended up feeling worse and worse throughout the day. I went to the urgent care, and they're like, we don't take your insurance, so we have no idea how to tell you what it'll cost. So I was like, fine, I'll go to the ER. I know they take it there. And that was a mistake. I should have never gone to the ER that night. I was there for 3 hours feeling miserable, 104 fever. And I'm thinking I got something because there was like dead rats in here and all their feces. So I'm thinking I got that. Was it hentavirus or something? And they're like, oh no, the incubation period on that is like 10 days or something. You wouldn't have it yet. So I'm like, I don't know what it is, but that's the only thing.
I was feeling good until I went in there.
And they're like, it's not COVID, or anything like that. And they didn't even give me a COVID test. Like, I think I looked at them. I'm like, I've never taken one. I don't plan on it, And so I don't even think they wanted to try. But they ended up giving me an IV. I lay there for a couple hours, felt better, and they sent me home, and I got better after that. And then it became this after a little bit of work and some money and donated materials. And
Well, I'll let you know how I feel tomorrow.
I haven't been sick from it yet since then, so I think we're okay.
I love it though. And it's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, and it gives me the I like having conversations with people. And
You
I
do.
like getting to know
you're a
even
big
people I
talker.
know. I like getting to know more than what our typical, like for you and me, for instance, one of our typical interactions would be around some type of meeting in the community, working to change, better the lives of people in our community. And so this is where we just get to sit down and talk.
What would you like to know, Mr. DeFleur?
Well, I'm not going to just sit here and like try to dig into
Rattle 'em
some
off.
of the, but
Into my deep dark secrets.
yeah, I don't, the way you talk, I doubt you have too many deep
I
dark
don't.
secrets. You might have
Yeah.
embarrassing things, but that's the thing with people. Like if you just kind of say, this is me, this is who I am, and you're open about that stuff, nobody can really embarrass you, right?
Yeah, no.
I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I was listening to this one. I can't even tell you what it was. I don't remember. I went down a rabbit trail yesterday, a rabbit hole, whatever. There was I started listening to both Unsolved Mysteries, and then that led me into
Robert Stack.
stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't that, but it was like the same
Oh.
idea. But that was what one of the podcasts was called, and then it was like conspiracy theory podcast, and that gets me every time. I'm like, I'm not a conspiracy theory nut, but I love listening to
The
them.
thoughts
And like,
behind
yeah.
it.
And so
Yeah.
I'm listening to all these, but there was one, and it was something to do with a program where our government was trying to like sabotage other governments to get the leaders in place. Not like the CIA would ever do that kind of stuff, but allegedly, sometime years and years ago, they worked to overthrow like the president of Indonesia. I don't know. I don't even know what decade this was. I don't remember. And so they set up this elaborate thing where they found like a dead ringer lookalike for the guy and like hired some prostitutes or something and recorded it like it was a porno film. And they thought that this would discredit the guy. But instead of just putting it out there, they invited him to like a viewing of it. And the guy was like, top notch work. Can I get copies of that? So he was like,
Proud of it.
he was proud of it, even though it wasn't him, but he was like, hey, people are gonna think I'm pretty good, you know, or whatever.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so like he wanted copies. They're like, oh well, so much for that, you know. So that's the
Plan Q.
U.S. government messing around where they didn't have any business and it backfired. But you know, if you live your life without any secrets, it's like, what can anybody hold over
I
you?
know, because I've often thought about that. You know, if you're going to go into public office, you need to make sure you got a clean background
Yeah,
because
Oh, for
somebody's
sure.
going to pull that stuff out.
That's few and far between to find a politician like that. I think one of our local, you know, representatives, Danny Burgess, that's from Zephyr Hills here where we live. He's got a squeaky clean back. He's not hiding
Yes.
anything. There's nothing for him to hide. He's lived clean and straight his entire life. You know, spent his years in the Catholic Church doing everything by the books. People that have known him growing up and going to high school with him are like, he didn't party, he didn't do any of that stuff. You know, there's just never going to be anything that comes up on him. So, you know, it's like, why don't people live their lives that way?
See, I could run for office then.
Really?
I could.
All right. Which office would you run for if you were running for one?
You know, I actually wrote my name in for president a few years ago, but
Yeah.
I think it was just me and my daughter that voted for me. So,
Have you ever seen
was
that
it.
guy, Vermin Supreme? He wears like a big rubber boot on his head. He's from like, I don't know, like Massachusetts or Vermont or something like that. And he, I mean, it's a joke, but he tries to like steer, you know, kind of help steer the election conversation, I think. But he actually does like do the proper stuff, at least in his state, to be on the ballot. Vermin Supreme is his name. It's like
I don't
every
know. I'll have
election
to go
cycle.
look and
Yeah,
I'll
if you look
Google.
up YouTube videos. Okay, so there was this one, this was when we lived up in Nashville. There was this guy that was running for, I think, mayor of Nashville or maybe governor of Tennessee. I don't really even remember. You know, this is where my research analyst, Amy's sitting in here off camera. Do you remember what Basil Marceau was running for? It was this kooky old guy, and he would say, you know, I'm basilmarceau.com. Like, that was his website, but he would say that that was his name, and maybe he had it legally changed, I don't know, but he had all these crazy ideas that he was running for. Like, his platform was making sure that all the flags, the U.S. flags at the courthouses and government buildings didn't have the gold fringe around it because that was illegal, and just things like this. And it's like, buddy, that might be a fine idea, but, you know,
It's not a political platform.
it's not a platform to run on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The Vermin Supreme guy that ran for president was talking about truth decay and molar corruption and stuff like that. I don't know, whatever. He had all these puns, and so it was
Oh
just,
my gosh.
yeah. So
That's
you
clever.
you wrote yourself in for president, but that's a little
It is, but you
ambitious.
know, in all truthfulness, I would, just because I'm so tired of politicians. I am so far beyond their mindset, and I think that there should be limitations on politicians. When you become that lifelong politician, there's so much corruption
Yeah.
behind you. You know, the quid pro quo. That's the reality of it. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and you know that goes on, and you'll never know the truth. You will never, ever, ever know the truth of anything that goes on in the White House or in any political office, just because they're not going to tell you.
No,
So-
and don't get me
It's just
started
frustrating.
don't get me started on conspiracies. Like I said, I was listening to all this podcast, and it's like, have we ever had a truly like clean and clear president as far as just and it's not always the president. I think so many times it seems like some of the stuff that goes on that we never really know about, it's other people. But there was one when Kennedy was president. Like, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's not even, this is, they have the Freedom of Information Act, like the release of papers, where they had this whole plan of what they were going to do. Of course, they had the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, but they were going to do these things that's called a false flag operation. And now people are going to be like, oh, he's one of those right-wing conspiracy nuts. Well, this wasn't a conspiracy. Well, it was a conspiracy, but it's not a theory.
But it happened.
It happened. Like, there's no doubt about it. They went and they had this whole plan. Like, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were all signed off on it on paper. And finally, I think it got all the way up to President Kennedy, and he's like, no, we're not going to do this. But they were actually going to, like, set bombs. They were going to actually kill U.S. citizens, but make it look like it was Cuba that had done it so that we could go to war with Cuba. And it's like, this was our government working against us. This is not a theory. It was a fact. Like, we know that this happened. And it's like, it just kind of makes you feel like, is there anybody we can really trust? You know?
To that question, I say no.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no one. And I think the ideals that people often start out in politics have that
Sure.
high expectation, and that's what they want to do, and they want to make things better. But, 5 or 10 years into it, the corruption has just devoured.
Yeah. So
It's a disease.
So why do you think people get into this, like, we call them career politicians? Why? I mean, that's not how our original, like, founding fathers and the earliest politicians, that's not what they did. How did we get there? Where
I think ego is one.
Okay.
I think ego, greed, most definitely. The fringe benefits that, who wouldn't want to go first class in their own aircraft
Oh, right.
and have their houses paid for, and the status. I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of humbleness in, not humbleness, but humility in that at all.
Yeah.
Very, very few.
And you've got, I mean, I don't even remember who it was. I don't get terribly involved in, like, being caught up with whatever's the latest thing that's happening, but there was some little blurb or report. I didn't even click on it because I was just like, yeah, that seems par for the course. But it was both Democrats and Republicans, and it was like, okay, all these like congressmen, senators, whatever, that it's like, here's their salary and here's their net worth, and you're like, there's no way you're ever going to be worth $90 million of making $200,000 to $400,000 a year. It's just not going to happen.
Well, and it's hard.
And it's like,
it's
what
hard
did you
to
do?
justify seeing this elite making policies for the rest of the world down here, because there's no comparison.
Well, that's not how it was supposed to be
No,
for our
absolutely.
country, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was supposed to be, you guys are our representatives. We are sending you in our place because we can't all be there to vote. So we're voting for you, but you've got to listen to your constituents and do what we say. Rosie Paulson was a guest that I had in here a few weeks back, and she talked about, saying, hey, you might not have to get caught up in all of the trappings of the whole political world, but we should all be concerned with what happens in government. And she says, you need to be calling your representatives because they can't know everything. Like, they don't know how to handle every situation. And so there's times when they are actually looking for our input as their constituents to say, here's what we think, here's what we would like to see happen. And I suppose it's hard for somebody that's almost, I mean, I guess I'm a little jaded at times, and I don't think it's just jaded. It's just kind of like, it's maybe pessimistic, whatever you want to call it, but it's just kind of like, this is what I see. It's not like I think that it's ever going to change in my lifetime, and maybe it will. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I should at least be more vocal about what I would like to see happen, because, if all they're hearing is the loudest voices out there that have the most dollars backing them, they don't really know what everyday people are looking for. So.
And that's true. I completely agree and support that. People around me laugh. I'm such a letter writer, and I mean, you all know I'm quite vocal, but I like to think that I am open-minded enough to see both sides. But I'll tell you, when I see injustice, or I'm a party to it and it's going on around me, I always speak up.
You're going to say something about it.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely.
So to go to your politicians and voice, you have to be a voice, because if you don't speak up, the next person probably isn't going to, and isn't going to. And it's not that you get out there to ruffle feathers, but somebody needs to be a voice for those that don't have a voice.
For sure. And so I think, that's the job sometimes. I shouldn't say job, maybe it's a calling more than a job, because you can do that from any vocation point or anything like that. But that's a calling that I believe many people have, is saying, your role, whatever it is that you do, your role is to be a voice for those that don't have it. And I've known people in nonprofit sectors, people that are pastors or work for churches or anything like that, and some of them, they just see their job as just doing whatever the responsibilities of that office are. But some of them say, I've been given a voice or a platform or whatever it is, and if I don't use that to benefit others who don't have that platform,
Yep, absolutely. And my pastor had asked me, well, I'll step back. Have you ever seen the movie Harriet?
No,
It's the
about
Harriet Tubman, yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Honest to goodness, you really should watch that. But
Sure.
as a child, when we studied Harriet Tubman, which I don't even know if they have that in school, I seriously doubt it. If they did, they probably changed her name. Leave it to the educated people out there. But anyway,
The elites that know more than us.
yeah. When I was a child, I could not get enough of her. Everything was the Underground Railroad for me. And Harriet Tubman, I loved everything about her. But I never really knew why. I was just drawn to her and her story, and I had all of the books about her, and I just couldn't get enough of her. And when the movie, so I've done all of these things in my life, and I had gone to see the movie Harriet with my friends when it first came out 2 years ago or something. And it was just, Amber was working, and it was her husband and her son. So we went, and I was sobbing. And Rich says, "What are you crying for?" And I said, "I now know why I do what I do."
Yeah.
But it took me, 57 years to know.
You're 57?
Yes, I'm 57. I actually, am I 57? No, I'm 58. Oh my gosh, I'm 58. I'm 58. I'm not 57. No, this was when I saw the movie.
Okay.
So that was,
It was 57.
It was 57, yes.
I just thought that was something I was supposed to say. I don't know.
Oh, sure. I know, because I look lovely, don't I?
Yes.
So
Absolutely
anyway,
radiant.
it dawned on me that that's what I've always been called to do, is to just be a servant, to serve other people, and to do what God has called me to do. And if that's to use my voice, just as she did, but there was such a correlation between how I view myself now and why I could never get enough of her as a child and what she did for those people. So
do you think the story and not legend, but I mean, she's legendary. Do you think that just the magnitude of her life actually helped to maybe shape or form you, or was it just something you resonated with?
Well, I think both of them.
Something you kind of aspired to a little bit?
Maybe subconsciously.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I've always thought that I was happy-go-lucky, but it wasn't until I started doing what I'm doing now. And then when my mom got sick, my dad was a caregiver for 15 years, and I've always been drawn to take care of, to be something for. I've always been drawn to do that.
Yeah.
But when I look at both of them, that's probably why.
How long was your mom sick?
15 years. She was diagnosed at when she was 56.
Was it
and she
Alzheimer's
passed.
or something?
No, she actually had 5 different diseases.
Whoa.
She had, she was diagnosed with MS first.
Okay.
And then it went, the one that ultimately took her life was scleroderma.
Okay.
And that is a hardening of your organs. And most people, to touch them would be like touching this desk. It's an overproduction of collagen. However, her diseases that she had were autoimmune, so her immune system couldn't fight anything off.
Oh my goodness.
But the the one that she had hardened her organs.
Okay.
So she had both of her kidneys removed, and it ultimately went in and did all of that. So she was sick for 15 years.
Oh my goodness.
She was on dialysis. She had her kidneys removed and was on dialysis for 10. But my dad took care of her
So your dad was her primary caregiver.
My
I mean,
dad
there
was-
had to have been like home nursing and things
every
like that.
day.
Yeah, there had to
For
have been.
absolutely, from anything you can imagine a nurse to do,
Yeah.
catheterization,
Right.
the whole thing.
Wow.
My dad did
Wow.
for 15 years, every day.
Oh
Took
my
her to
goodness.
dialysis 3 days a week, every doctor's
So was he
appointment.
retired at that point? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say if not, he had to take like an early retirement, right? I mean, there's no.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
absolutely
it
no
was.
way.
And actually, they had bought their home and their property and this huge, massive barn, and they were going to restore it. They bought it in June, and she got sick in August,
Oh my goodness.
2 months later.
Where were they living? What state?
Indiana.
They're in Indiana. Okay, and that's where you
That's where
grew
I'm
up.
from.
That's where you're from. Yeah. So what? I don't know if I've ever asked you this. What part of Indiana were you from?
Right outside of South Bend.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was gonna say I love geography, and if I don't know where something is, I'm always like the
We'll
first thing
figure
I'll
it
do is
out.
I'll go to Google Maps. I'll be like, except I turn my phone all the way off earlier, but I'll go to Google Maps and I'll just look it up. Like, oh, okay, I know where that's at, and I've been to this place or that place. So, especially people that are like from around the world somewhere. I mean, like I have no idea where that is. It's amazing how many like countries there are, and it's like I have no clue about this stuff. But
I know.
if I'm watching a TV show and it'll like go to some scene and it'll say the little ticker at the bottom of the screen that tells you what place in the world it is, I'll grab my
Google
phone
it.
and Google it right there and like start learning about it. There's one thing, I was watching some show and they're in this slums in like Nairobi, Kenya. I think it's called, if I remember right, Kibera or something like that. I could be wrong on that totally. I don't know. Like the fact checkers will get me, I'm sure. But it's like there's 2 million people that live in this slum. It's one of the largest slums in the world, and they're all in metal or cardboard huts. There's just tacked together in rows, maybe with electricity. There's literally rivers of sewage running down the road. It's just
Oh my God.
it's saddening to
gosh.
no end. And it's like, I mean, 2 million people living like that don't know any different. I mean, they're born there, they die there, that's it. And so, but it just fascinates me, trying to learn how other people live. And sometimes people see that and they want to like look down on that, not look down on them like to spit on them, but to say, oh, I'm glad I don't have it like that. I should feel glad about myself. Or other people have a response of, I feel guilty that I have so much and they have so little. The thing is, I think if you can find some kind of satisfaction in whatever your circumstances are, because there is, I mean, in the midst of that, it's a terrible life, but they're alive in the grace of God that day, and so there are people that live there that actually have found some type of happiness in life, and for us to look at it and say, oh, that must be the worst, and they're probably thinking like, hey, I've got my life.
It's their perspective. And
Yeah.
you often hear when missionaries and other people just travel to these other countries or third world countries, they'll say, oh, they're so happy,
Yeah.
they're smiling, and it's because they don't know any different.
Yeah.
If they were to have experienced or been exposed to North America, could you even imagine?
I don't think they could. I mean,
No,
it's like
it
you
would-
and I looking at, basketball players, football players, whatever, they're making, have these $100 million contracts and all this stuff. And they're like, the
Yeah,
way they're living is just like, I can't even comprehend that.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so like, what's I know so little about sports, right? But like, I see some of these things. So you're like a fan of the Chicago Bears, pretty much anything from Chicago. So, I mean,
Yes.
how did you just skip over like the Colts and all that stuff?
Well,
You're
the
like,
Colts weren't in Indiana when I
Oh,
was a
okay.
kid. They
That's
used
how
to be
much I know.
They used to be Baltimore,
Gotcha.
and then they came to Indiana. But because we're right outside of Chicago,
Yeah, that makes sense.
is one. But Chicago's actually my very favorite city.
Okay.
Uh,
You've never been murdered there, right?
no,
Not
but you want to
yet.
hear? Yeah, you got a funny story.
Sure.
So, well, I had gone to school in Chicago for hair and makeup for television, and I was doing a show at Marshall Fields. And at the time, now back in the day, I would bleach my hair blonde in the summer, red in the fall, and brown in the winter.
Okay.
And I did that for years and years. Well, I had done a show in at Marshall Fields up there, and I was coming home. Well, I had a IROC Z28 that had
Nice.
T-tops. So I'm driving home.
Was
Well,
this like this would have been
this would have been
70s,
no.
80s?
This was in the late 80s, early
Okay.
90s.
Sorry, I'm a car guy. I grew up around Flint area, and so like Detroit, Flint, all the GM cars and everything that are there. Like, if you had showed me a picture of it somehow, I could have told you within a couple year period what that car was, and I can't tell you how I would know that. I would just know
No,
that.
you would just
Like
know
I
it.
just
Yeah,
that was
'cause you're-
life growing up for me. So when
I
you said
get that.
IROC Z28, I immediately pictured it. It wasn't
Yeah.
blue, was it?
Actually, it was.
With the little silver
Yes. No, gold.
gold.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Nice.
Actually, it was. So anyway,
It's just the perfect color for that car.
so I'm coming home on the Dan Ryan. Well, there was a lot of construction going on, and I don't know if anybody who knows Chicago knows Cabrini Green, which is where you do not want to go
Okay.
in Chicago. Anybody.
Yeah.
So I'm driving around, and it's like, you got to go this way, and okay, so I take that exit, and I'm driving around, and pretty soon a cop pulls me over, and he says, "What are you doing over here?" I said, "I don't know." I said, I was getting off the Dan Ryan. I said, "But it's got this construction. I'm supposed to go back this way." And he goes, "You get out of here. You need to go out of this way. You go down here and you get on this ramp, and then it'll take you right back." Okay. And it was a bad neighborhood. So here I am, this blonde chick, and I think I probably only weighed 100,
Blonde chick in
105
a
pounds
sports car.
in a sports car with my T-tops out.
Right.
Who cares if your doors are locked?
In the cloth sleeve, the vinyl sleeve, they would go and
Yeah.
store it in the back.
Yeah, who cares? They're just going to rip you right out of the top of that and take it off.
T-tops were the thing, man. Like, how
Yeah.
did that ever end? Those were so cool.
I don't know.
It's like
I
you
don't
can't
know.
afford a convertible.
Somebody
get
else
T-tops.
took over GM, I guess. So I leave and I get out on the thing and I'm driving around and I'm like, what the heck? Driving around. I end up back at the same place, the exact same place. Here, the same cop. And he pulls me over again. He said, "Ma'am, I've told you to get out of here. You cannot be in here. This is not a good place for you to be. You need to roll your windows up. You need to put your tops in. And you need to get out of here." By this time, I'm crying because now he's got me really afraid. And I mean, it was not a good place at all.
Oh my goodness.
He says, "You know what?" He says, so we got out. I had to put my T-tops in, roll my windows up. He said, "You follow me out of here." He took me to get me on the right ramp. It was like 10 minutes out of his way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Do not go to Cabrini Green in Chicago. But I ended up there. I don't know where we were going with that story.
I don't know. We were talking about sports and people get paid a whole lot. And...
Yeah, but I'll tell you, if I'd have found Walter Payton in those areas, I'd have stopped with everything I was doing.
I don't think Walter Payton would have been there. Probably. I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And another funny story? So, Mike Dicka, he's got a restaurant down where Duck Bears, where I was going to school at. And so I'd go on Mondays, and I went in there one Monday night, and I was talking to the bartender, and I was sitting next to this guy, on my left at the bar. And so I'm just chatting. I'm like, "Does Walter ever come in here?" And the bartender says, "Yeah, he's been in here a few times." I said, "Oh my gosh, I just love it, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "Why, are you a Bears fan?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm a diehard Bears fan." And he says, "So the guy sitting here next to you?" And I looked over and I said, "No." He goes, "Well, I'm Kevin Butler. I'm the kicker for Chicago Bears." I'm like, "Well, I've never seen you without your helmet on."
Fair.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
I didn't expect to see him sitting there. I mean, it
That's
wasn't,
funny.
somebody that I really, really liked, but
Yeah, I had a youth pastor growing up, and he and his family, they grew up around Chicago, not in the the nicest of areas, I guess, and he talked about they would go around stealing hood ornaments off of vehicles and stuff like that just to pass the time, really. And it was like trading cars, like, look which one I got. He said one time he was trying to steal one off a Mack truck. He had a pair of like vice grips. He's trying to wrench on and he's like, those things wouldn't come off. And so he says a guy, like, this trucker starts chasing after him, but it's a trucker, so he couldn't catch him, and he's out of there. But his brother, my youth pastor's brother, I mean, obviously this is when they're like grown men and everything. I've met him a few times, later on, a few years back now is what I'm trying to say. And that guy, everywhere you would go, he would always see somebody famous, like whether it's sports or a musician or whatever. And so we were visiting them at that point. Both of the guys lived in Jacksonville. And Amy and I had come down, visited my grandparents. So my grandparents actually used to winter in Zephyr Hills. They were snowbirds. And so I was familiar with this town before this church that I met the pastor at called me to come down here. And so anyway, we had visited my grandparents. Then we went up through Daytona and up to Jacksonville, and spent like a night or two at my old youth pastor and his wife's townhouse that they had. So we went out to dinner with his brother and all of them. And we're in this like restaurant, and of course they knew some like Chicago style, like Italian beefs, Polish sausages, Maxwell Street, all that good stuff. And we're having, all this food. And so my youth pastor's brother, Art, he's like, that's Artis Gilmore. And they're like, what? Like basketball player from the Bulls, he's like, no, that's Artis Gilmore. I promise you it is. And so finally, like, he just walked up and he's like, hey, Mr. Gilmore, I don't want to interrupt your time with your family, but just wanted you to say me and my brother grew up in Chicago. We're big fans of yours.
Mhm.
He's like, thank you. And that was it. And it was just like, how do you, so he was ready to see, everywhere he went, he was looking for those guys. So, I guess that's just part of that culture, but here you are sitting next to the kicker and you're like, I don't know you, man. Buddy, you're a kicker.
Put your helmet on and then I identify
Yeah.
you. I would tell you.
I wouldn't know hardly anybody famous if they were sitting right next to me. I mean,
that reminded me of me because I've met a ton of famous people.
yeah.
I ended up at evening at the Improv with Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay.
And he invited me to his taping on
Oh,
Monday.
you told me about this.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Tell that story.
Yeah. So my girlfriend and I went to California in '92 on our Partners in Crime vacation. And I had just gotten over pneumonia. And when we got out there was when the floods hit. They hadn't had rain like that in 100
like,
years.
Then they had mudslides.
Yes, it was horrible. And
I remember hearing
so she and I and my cousin, we went to the evening at the Improv there in LA on Saturday night. And we had to park in this parking garage. So I was telling her, I said, did you guys see the Seinfeld episode of when they got lost in the parking garage? No. I said, oh my gosh, it's hysterical. Well, because we were out there and it was raining, the pneumonia set into my lungs and I got bronchitis. So I talk like this. So we get to the evening at the Improv and we're talking about this. I said, oh my gosh, there's Jerry Seinfeld right there. And she goes, no, it isn't. I said, that's Jerry Seinfeld standing right there. So I went up and introduced myself to him, but I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And so we chatted for a little bit and he said, well, hey, if you're going to still be in town, he said, come down to the studio on Monday and I'll give you tickets and you guys can come to the show. I said, all right, I'm there. So Val and I, and our vacations, literally, you just never knew where we were going to end up or what was going to happen. And so we go in, which I thought was the gate we were supposed to go in. Anyway, it ended up in the back in Burbank. It ended up at the back end of the NBC studios. Mm-hmm. So we're just walking through there. And I told the guard, I said, I'm supposed to get tickets at the Jerry Seinfeld show, blah, 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 blah. The whole time I'm unable to talk. And it's pouring. It is absolutely pouring down. So he tells us, you got to go through. So we ended up going to the commissary, and Fred Savage was in there eating lunch. And Erie, Indiana was being taped there, and Rosanna was being taped there. So we got to walk through this whole thing. And pretty soon, we hear somebody whistling, singing in the rain. It was, and I can't whistle or I would do that for you. But he was whistling, singing in the rain. So I turned around, and it was Jerry Seinfeld. And he goes, hey, I know you. You're the girl that can't talk. And I said, yes, as a matter of fact. So he took Val and I in, and if you go to my Facebook, you'll see our photos in there. But he took us in the back. We went in where they were eating their lunch.
Wow.
And it was the episode where they were Dylan and O'Brien, and they were picking somebody up from the airport, and where Elaine and Kramer were stuck on a street corner after a basketball game. That's the episode we were at. We had the best time ever there. Yeah, pretty cool.
So what if there's one person that you can meet, and I think I know who it is. Who is it that you would like out of all of them that you're like, I want to meet this person? Who would that be?
Well, would it be the guy I want to go home with? Because that's Tommy Shaw, because I've met Tommy Shaw a couple times, but I'd go home with him. But that's okay, because Jeff knows about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say this isn't even. We already talked about living like a secret. You
Yeah,
you don't have it.
yeah,
You're
no.
pretty open about this.
Oh, heck yeah.
So Tommy Shaw, drummer for the Styx, right?
Oh no,
Or for Styx.
he's lead singer.
Lead singer.
Yeah, and
I don't know
guitar.
much.
Well, that's a shame because you need to look him up. You Google him. He's like,
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna put like some pictures or something. I'm writing a note right here.
yeah.
I'll overlay some pictures and
Brian
stuff. Maybe a little
Urlacher's on
video.
my list, but Tommy Shaw's at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I was in love with
Urlacher
him
was.
in high school.
Here's again.
He's
my
a Bear.
He was a
He's-
quarterback, right?
No, he's a linebacker for
He's
the
linebacker.
Bears.
See.
Yeah, but the
Okay.
funny thing is, he only looks good in his uniform. When you put hair on him, he's not that cute. I don't know what it is. When he's balding in his uniform, he's like, dang, that's illegal. But you put his hair on
Put your
him.
clothes on, man.
Yeah,
you
it's
know
like,
everything.
okay, yeah,
Put them
okay.
all on.
But
More
Tommy
clothes is
Shaw,
better.
yeah. And they were big when I was in school, so I was such a huge fan. And my old boyfriend, you know, he'd never let me go see him in concert. So once we ditched each other, I became free.
Oh, that's funny.
I know, and he's never called me to play drums for him
No
yet.
kidding.
No,
Man,
it's a shame.
what a shame.
I know. If
I
you'd
mean,
only hear me once.
as famous as you are on the drums, I mean, you had an Easter
Right?
gig this year.
I know.
Yeah, no other musicians are up that early in the morning. You're out there doing the hard work,
I'm
playing
telling
drums in
ya.
high heels.
Yeah.
Easter Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I might be able to find a picture of that one somewhere. I don't know.
Well, I
That'd
tell
be fun.
everybody, if you know him, you give him my phone number.
I tell you,
Tell 'em.
I don't get starstruck too much at all. Like I don't care. I don't know what it is, like, because I know it's not going to change my life that much. It'll be good for a fun story, and that's about it. And like a little memory, like, oh, that was cool that day that I met so and so. And I might have met a couple famous people. I don't even remember. But I've got probably 2 or 3 that I think would be great to meet and hang out with. And at the same time, I'd be like, they've got their own life and their own world, and they wouldn't want to hang out with me. But one of Amy and one of our favorite comedians is named Nate Bargatze, and he's just hilarious. And we actually got to see him down in Tampa about a little over a month ago, and so we had a good time with that. But I've got a country music singer from Texas that's my absolute favorite singer and musician in the world, Cody Jinks, and he I would love
Is
to,
this
like,
for me?
you can have that, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm a guest and I got my
yeah.
own bottle. Thanks.
But yeah, he's just awesome, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to meet this guy. And so, forget what it was, but we do this thing where we'll like look up. It's just to see who can be the best sleuth and figure stuff out. You can find where people live based on property tax data. Like, you know, that's public records, right? So are voter IDs. And so sometimes we'll just, like, I'm not going to be a stalker and like do anything about it. It's just fun to, like, okay, figured it out, done. And if you have a corporation and you put your home in the corporation, it's a little harder to find. But if you have any idea what the name of their corporation might be, you can always look up the owner's records, or you can look up that person and see if they're attached to any corporation. So there's always ways to do this stuff. And there's, you know, we find out where Cody Jinks lives, and, you know, we're like, wait a second, the road, the name of the road is called Seldom Seen Road or Way or something like that in whatever town in Texas. I don't even remember. I was like, wait a minute, he's got a lyric in his song is talking about never alone, always lonely is the name of it. You know, like, as a musician, he's never alone. There's always people around him, but he's always lonely when he's out on the road. And he's like, and then the next lyric goes, easy to find, seldom seen. That's like the lyric in the song. I'm like, wait a minute, he put a clue right in the song. You can find me really easy. Seldom seen road, you know. But anyways, it's like, wait a minute, you know. So I didn't feel so creepy, like, looking up where this guy lives anymore. But I think the reason we were doing that too was because he did this cool video where Randy Travis is one of his idols, and that's one of Amy's idols as well. And so there's this video with Cody Jinks sitting there in somebody's house, you know, playing an acoustic guitar. He Walked on Water was the song, which is Randy Travis' song. And then the camera kind of pans out, and you can see there's he's at Randy Travis's house singing Randy Travis' song, doing a really good job of it too.
Wow.
And Randy Travis is just smiling. This is recently, like, after he's had the stroke, and he's doing, like, he's progressing, but, you know, Randy Travis, he's not really talking very much, not singing very much.
Yeah.
He's getting closer and closer to that, but you know, so just for, you know, and it makes you think, like, even famous people have their idols that they look up to, and they're like, to be able to put a smile on Randy Travis's face, what a cool memory for him, you know.
Yeah. I saw when Hart did
Nice.
I forget where they were at, what is it, Radio City Music Hall in New York. and they did Stairway to Heaven from Led Zeppelin. Did you
Yes.
see that? And Robert Plant sitting up there
Dude,
crying
were you
because he
there?
would. I wasn't there.
Oh, you just saw that video.
Yeah, I saw that
That
video.
is legendary.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. But to your point, that's exactly. I mean, they were moved
Yeah.
by someone else's performance of that,
Well,
and they're
and I think
fans of
part of
theirs.
that was because was it Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, was he was on the drums for that song, and he had a bowler hat like
Oh,
his
I don't
dad
know.
would have.
Really, I
So
didn't see that
I think
part.
that was actually like kind of the behind the scenes explanation for why he was like moved to tears.
Oh,
because
so you ruined it for me.
No, but it still was a super powerful
Yeah.
performance, and so like, that one I remember seeing that, and it brought me to tears just seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way like when they open those curtains on the video, and then the choir is like back there like singing the backing parts of that song, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if that doesn't move you, there's something wrong,
Yes. Well, I saw. I don't want to get into the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, but
Oh, let's do it. It's fun.
on Ellen, or I think it was Ellen. She had Pink on there, or Jimmy Fallon. It
I was
might
gonna say,
have been Jimmy
didn't
Fallon.
they cancel Ellen's show or something?
Yeah, it was on
recently?
Jimmy Fallon, but Pink was on there, and she's a huge Johnny
Okay.
Depp fan. And the guy says, well, if there's anybody you've ever, could you meet, who would it be? And she's just a huge Johnny Depp fan.
Yeah.
Well, then pretty soon Johnny Depp comes walking
Oh,
out, and she
nice.
was so embarrassed and just, oh
She
my
was
gosh.
fangirling over him.
Yeah. So, everybody has their own idols and,
Yeah.
people they want to meet and starstruck.
I think the other one that I joke with Amy about that I could really hang out with pretty well, because we're one and the same. Like he and I are identical. Is Chip Gaines, like Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Yes.
He and I had this dream one night where he and I were we were building stuff, and we were just hanging out like a couple dudes. And I woke up and I told her, like, this actually happened. Like, this dream was so vivid. I'm like, I believe this actually did happen, and that I went there, I teleported or something. I'm not sure, but Chip and I are tight, and so to this day, I still feel like he and I could actually
You could
hang
sit down
out.
and have dinner.
Yeah, he and I could sit down and, oh man, we'd be grilling steaks and stuff, talking about, the only difference between me and him is he's just so much more successful at everything that he does. Like I don't
know if he would have seen Emma's little kitchen that you did. I'll bet he'd be
man.
impressed.
Dude, I'm telling you, that thing, I think it's more sentimental for me than it is for anyone else. I'm like, she's outgrown it pretty much, where she doesn't really use it too often, and I'm like, what do I do with it? Like, I don't want to put it in storage for what? Like, if she has some kids and they want it, I don't want to sell it. I mean, I could probably sell the thing for hundreds upon hundreds of dollars, but I spent about 40 plus cumulative hours building that kitchen for her I think second Christmas, or when she was 2 years old. And I mean, it's got light up burners.
I know.
Like little LED
It's
lights.
very impressive.
An
Very
oven with a
impressive.
pull out shelf, and there's a light that comes on in there to simulate the heat idea. It doesn't really warm up. It has a microwave. I put a timer dial on it, and a light, and a little fan that I had, so it sounds like it's just like I went over the top with this thing. It's got a sink, no running water, but there's an actual like little bar sink in there, and I just went crazy with this thing. And but I enjoyed making it for her, and really the look on Amy's face when she saw it for the first time, because she hadn't been seen. I didn't let her see the updates, and when she saw it before Emma was ever awake, it like she started tearing up.
I'm
She was
sure.
like, "Wow."
I'm sure, because it was just a magnificent piece of work. You
Yeah.
did a phenomenal job on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very good.
So I was trying to think. I don't know. I got sidetracked. I started picturing Texas because we actually went. My cousins moved to Waco, Texas, and I got two cousins that are sisters, and then their husbands. They moved down there, and so we got to kind of tour some of the,
Jim
like the
Jones?
silos. No, we didn't do that.
Okay.
I have no idea. Like, well, because I think that
That
was
was
a
way
little
before your
outside of
time.
Waco anyway. I mean, I
Oh.
remember it for sure. But again, conspiracy theories, like the government went in there and straight up set fire to that place, while people with kids were in there. But anyway, yeah, I'm familiar with with that event. But we toured like the silos, that Magnolia, whatever they call it, Magnolia group has, Chip and Joe's
Oh,
group.
Chip and yeah.
Yeah, we
Yes.
toured all that stuff, and I'm telling you, they have run that business better than almost anything, because what they've done is they've got a food truck court And there's all these people that own their food trucks. They have a place they can park, they can sell, they can pull up and leave if they want. They've got a bakery that they set up. They've got the mercantile store that's got all these cool little things, and some of it's a little kitschy or cheap, but most of it's pretty good quality stuff. It's not like going to a lot of tourist towns where it feels like the same T-shirt shop over and over again. And I can't even remember. There was just so much, like the other restaurant that they have, just the economic impact that couple and that family has had on their community is huge. And I'm not saying they changed it, but they brought a renewed interest. They made Waco cool again, like a redemption after the the stuff with the
After the fall.
that cult and all that had been shot up, burned up. But they did a lot of cool stuff there, and still do. And then the people that have been on their Fixer Upper show, like what's his name, Jimmy, that makes the metal signs and stuff, and Clint that makes the tables and all these other things. My cousin's husband went and worked for that company for a while, just building their little crafts that they sell. We actually went out to Jimmy's sign shop, whatever it's called, I don't know, and I talked with him, and he's just obviously he's just this big old boy, kind of you'd picture him wearing bib overalls, and he's running his shop though, and of course he's been on TV, but he's still running his business like a regular guy, because he is. And he had it was like an 86 Chevy 4-wheel drive 2-tone. It was just perfect. What a lot of guys call the square bodies these days, most trucks are square. But anyway, I just started a conversation with him about that. I don't care about his time on TV or any of that. I'm like, that your Chevy, that's tight. I love it. It's pretty cool. And just then I look over and there's 2-year-old Emma running across this field away from everyone. There's nowhere for her to go. It's Texas. It's a long run. But I'm just saying, where does she think she's going? So we just talked for a minute. I'm like, I better go get my kid. But, that's the way there's some people that are, crazy famous, crazy rich, that are unapproachable. But most people are pretty laid
They
back.
put their pants on just like you and I do. I have
They
said
jump
that all
into
my
them
life.
and just
Absolutely.
they just jump in the air and pull them on real quick. That's how I put my pants on.
Sometimes you lay down and hope your belly flattens this way.
Uh,
Kind of like the Golden Girls, When you lay down, things fall off to the sides.
I wonder how long before we would get into a Golden Girl.
Sorry, I can't help it. It's human nature, or not in human nature. It's just natural for me. They roll right off my tongue.
Oh man. So, you're talking about trying to get your pants to fit, and I finally decided that I'm not I'm not going to size up anymore. I'm not going to get the next bigger size pants. I'm done with that. So I said, okay, I've got to at least plateau off or lose some weight. So we started going to the gym a while back. And the funny thing is, as a local pastor, the wellness center at the hospital, they've got where they'll let local pastors in for free. But I found out that I was never going there. And part of the problem was, the couple times that I did go, I kept bumping into people I knew, and it was either self-conscious, or I felt like I was supposed to talk, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to go there and ignore everyone. Well, then Planet Fitness came in, and I used to have a membership there before I moved to Florida, and it's you can go in, you put your headphones, your AirPods, whatever in, and you just get to working out. So we go there about 3 days a week and do fairly well with that. Did you start going to Planet Fitness too, right?
Yeah, I go. I just go and do my walk.
Okay.
I walk there.
Treadmill thing?
Yeah.
I can't stand treadmills.
Well,
I'd rather go outside.
I know, but I can't do the heat.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it just makes me sick. Heat and I do not do well.
Kind of in the wrong state for that.
I know, but anywhere, everyone said, Beth, why are you? Because I've always hated heat, but after menopause, it just got worse, and I think that when they take my temperature, it says 98.6, and I know that's lying because it feels like it's 150 internally. Yeah. And I just can't do it. So I've always been that way. However, people would joke and say, what do you move to Florida for? Because it's hot and humid back home. Yeah. It just doesn't last as long as it does here.
That's for certain.
But
the nice thing is, we have air conditioning.
Yes.
I don't know how people used to live in Florida back, I don't know how long ago, but before that was common.
Exist, right.
The older homes, they all have either the jalousie windows or where all of them are you turn the crank and they all swivel out, maybe 3 sections. Our house was built in, I think, 1974, maybe something like that, in the 70s, and it as far as I remember it might be older, I don't know, but all the windows are like just these cheap aluminum frames, single pane. I think it's 3/32 thickness glass. And every time if I actually open one, it always sounds like it's about to shatter one of them. And so you get them open and you're like, okay, phew, we made it.
Until next
But I did have a broken window pane that stayed broken for a good number of years before I finally replaced that. And I keep telling Amy, I'm like, listen, I'll get it done. You don't have to nag me and nag me and nag me every 6 months to hurry up
I
and
don't
do
think
it.
she nags.
No,
I don't
no.
think so.
But that's my good joke, you know, like it's every 6
Yeah.
months. You don't have to nag me every 6 months. But
Well, you know, my house has the jealousy windows too, and we replaced a lot of them in the back area. But over my dining room, they're the slatted ones, and you
Yeah.
screw up. And I gotta tell you, I love them, and I love the charm and the character of them.
Mm.
And honest to goodness, they are very, very snug, very tight. So I
Okay.
don't feel like there's any air getting out of those whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I love the look of those windows. I don't, and you can't replace them like that at
No,
all.
no, they're not making it that way anymore.
You'd get the white,
But it-
double pane or
Yeah.
whatever.
I used to wonder, why do they have these windows? You know, like why is that on all these old houses? And I finally realized, oh, before like air conditioning was a major thing, you needed all the window to be open to get as much breeze in
Sure,
there as you
yeah.
could. And so it's like the whole, it's not just raise the sash and you get half
Half
of
of
it.
it.
You get the whole thing opened up.
That's
And
true.
so
That's
it's
very
like
true.
you got to get some cross through breeze. So
Mm-hmm.
there's actually, I mean, you're familiar with this, a type of architecture in Florida, the cracker style house. And
Yes.
Florida crackers are, it's not like a racial thing, it's like the whipped crackers for cattle, running
Yes.
cattle, like old ranchers and stuff. And so allegedly that's where the, you know, the term
The term
came
came,
from.
that is where the term came
But
from. Yeah.
so I tell my daughter Emma that she's a little cracker baby because she keeps like she's always taking her shoes off and running in the dirt and all this. I'm like, she's a Florida cracker. You know, she was
Mhm.
born here. That's all she's
That's
ever
all she
known as
knows.
living here. So I say, you little cracker, you know. And so anyway, they would build these houses though, and I actually kind of fell in love with it. I want to build one someday where most of them are built on little like pedestal, like brick pedestals instead of on a ground foundation. But a true cracker style home has a larger overhang on the roof to provide more shade so the sun isn't blasting right through the windows. And then they would actually make like a breezeway kind of between, like maybe you'd have your kitchen area and some other rooms over here and then all your bedrooms on one side, but you can open up the big doors so that you'd have this whole breezeway through, and it kind
And
of
so
just
the air would do
pulls
the
air
cross,
through it and
yeah,
everything.
cross breeze.
And so they built houses specifically to keep them a little bit cooler. And I'm like, you know, all that went away with all these like energy efficient windows and
Mhm.
better insulation and air conditioning and all that. And I'm like, there was something about the way they built them that was just brilliant, you know. And now we're just like, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, imagine
Yeah.
using that. Well, where my house sits, and the way that it sits, we have it's not necessarily that breezeway walkway, but it's open. It has
Mhm.
the same style open floor plan, and we get a cross breeze.
Yeah.
Constantly. I don't care if it's hot out. We still get a cross breeze coming in from the way that it sits and the area of the hill. Yeah, I love it. Love it, love it.
Now, how long have you lived in Florida?
I've been in Florida since 2006. What's that? 16 years.
Yeah. So what brought you guys down here?
Jeff, on a whim, applied for a job as the chief horticulturist for
Okay.
the city of Fort Lauderdale,
Okay.
and he got the job, and we said, okay, here we go.
So then how'd you get up into Zephyr Hills area?
The company that he used to work for in Ohio, he had his own business in
Mhm.
Indiana, and then
Because
I
he's a
got
certified arborist, right?
He's an arborist and a master gardener and a
Nice.
horticulturist.
Yeah.
And
Which are three related but separate things.
They're all
That's
three,
that's
yeah.
pretty cool though.
the three separate, yeah. So, and I got transferred with my job to Ohio. So he sold his business and we moved to Ohio. And when I went to Ohio,
That sounds terrible.
well, it was because I went to
'Cause it
Ohio
was
in
Ohio.
April and my job was done in November.
Oh wow.
And so they said, well, you can transfer out to Kansas City. And I said, I'm not going to follow you across the street. I'm not doing it again. So, because that was my third transfer within the
Oh
company.
my goodness. Who are you working
Sprint.
for then? Okay.
I was with Sprint. And So, well, it was United Telephone and then it was Sprint. So, uh, Jeff applied for a job here on a whim
Okay.
and went to Fort Lauderdale. Well, then the company that he worked for in Ohio called him and said, "We've got a position in St. Leo. Would you come back?"
Okay.
And so,
Which that's the university that's up here in
St.
San
Leo.
Antonio,
Yep,
Florida. Yeah.
yep. So we came up and looked at it over a weekend, and I was so glad because I hated living down there. And it wasn't that what I hated about it was 365 days a year, it was the exact same thing.
Mm.
Exact same thing. It was never a break, never a change. And all of their roads and it just goes from one to the other to the other to the other. There's no break. So you might be in Plantation to Sunrise to Tamarack and they just all are connected. And a side street is 8 lanes.
What?
A side street is 8 lanes back and forth. So you got 4 on this side, 4, and it's constant.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and I just hated it. And so when Jeff had the opportunity, I said, "Oh yeah."
So he came up to work at St. Leo University doing, I'm assuming doing that same stuff, like gardening, horticulture.
Yeah, he was grounds director at
grounds
St. Leo.
director, nice. And so was that when you went to work for the post office there?
That's actually how I got at the
Okay.
post office. Yeah,
So you didn't have any like postal experience
I
really
had
before
none.
that?
I had none.
So what was your like starting?
So I went over to see him for lunch one day, and I said, "Oh, I got to go to the post office." He said, "Well, there's a post office right over here on campus." So I went over and I talked with Cheryl, and so when I came home, I said, "I know where I want to work." And he said, "Where?" And I said, "I want to work at that little post office over there." It was so cute. It's just this little bitty trailer, you know. Well, the very next day, Cheryl calls me and she said, "Your husband said that you wanted to work here." She said, "I have a position for a PMR, which is Postmaster replacement." She said, "I need somebody to work on Saturdays for me."
Oh, okay, so it's replacing like when the postmaster's
Yep.
not on duty, you're there.
Yeah. I said, "Oh, okay." So that was in March. So I went in and did all my paperwork, filled it all out, never heard anything. Well, in May, they hired me. So in May, after all of the fingerprints and the background checks and the whole thing, which took about 8 or 9 weeks, they said, "Okay, you were ready to start." Cheryl left that post office
Okay.
and took a job at Durant,
Okay.
and it was empty. It was open. They said, "Well, here you go."
The whole thing. So you're in charge now.
And so literally I walked in and there I was, and I was there for about almost 10 years, 9.5
Wow.
years.
So you started out no post office experience, none of that,
Mm-mm.
and they're like, your first role there is running it.
Mhm.
Okay. I have questions. First of all, the post office is or is not actually owned by the federal government.
It is not.
It is not. That's what I thought. They don't receive funding really from the federal government
No,
in the sense
but
that
they're
people might
overseen.
think. But it's overseen or controlled
Mhm.
by it or oversight by
Mhm.
the federal government. So when people have like all these critiques or criticisms or complaints about, the post office being a waste of money or a drag on the country, that's not really accurate.
No, absolutely
So why do people
not.
like, where did we get that idea from? Because it's
Because
U.S.
it used to
Postal
be.
Service.
No,
used to be.
it used to be.
Okay.
And I think if I could remember, the act, it was in the 70s, I think, when that dissolved, deregulation and regulation, and that was when that was. And the unfortunate part is the government still controls a lot, and you've heard often about the post office being in financial ruins, and part of that, a very big part of that, was because the government required the post office to pre-fund their retirement.
Okay.
So they had to set aside all of the money for who was going to retire in the years
They
ahead.
have to set it aside now,
Yes.
not like every year
Yes.
as you're
They
working.
had to pre-fund that, and
That's
they
like
could
crippling
never.
you. That's taking all of your capital.
That's
and
exactly
putting
what it did, and it was just this constant battle.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was
while trying to keep up their buildings. And
Yeah.
probably had to purchase them from the government somehow or whatever.
and so you could never really get anything done. And the other part of it was I question so much of the management techniques and
Mhm.
the procedures and processes. There, you just saw a lot of
I'm sure you
waste.
kept your mouth shut about it too, and you
I
never,
did.
never,
I
ever
never
said
said a
anything to anybody.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you know how well that goes over.
yeah.
Yeah, but
So what, you know, I mean, you were on a college campus, but it was a post office. So
United
it
States
was
Post Office.
because there is a post office in town too, isn't there? In
There's
San
one in San
Antonio.
Antonio, but St. Leo
But St. Leo
actually
has
has
its
its own.
own. Okay, I didn't realize that. So
It was
it's a
there
different
before the
zip code then.
university. It was a college then.
Really? Okay.
It was actually a parochial school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So is that a like its own zip code then for that
it is.
post
And
office?
the biggest reason.
What is that zip code?
33576.
I was just making sure.
33574. I'm sorry, 33576
caught
in
you.
San Antonio.
Okay.
But the biggest reason, and they were going to close that, but St. Leo did a tremendous amount of mail, and they had a bulk account. And I'm sure you probably know what bulk mail
Yeah.
is, but people hate to do bulk mail
Okay.
because it's not an but I loved it.
Mhm.
I love doing bulk mail. And actually, when I started there, I think there was one bulk mail permit. And when I left, there were 7.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 bulk mail because it was, and so that's what kept us there was those bulk mail accounts.
I see. So you guys, you didn't have any like delivery cars, package cars,
I
or
didn't
anything
have,
like
no,
that?
but I had a post office.
You had a post
I
office.
had a post office. So we had, I don't know, 1001, 2450. I think we had 250 post office boxes.
Yeah. And
So,
then did you do delivery within the campus at all, or was that
Yeah,
or was that
we-
the campus's job?
it was both.
Okay.
All of their mail came to me.
Yeah.
I sorted it and processed it.
Yeah.
And then they came, once that was done, then they would come pick it
They
up
come
and then
do it.
they took it to their mailroom.
I worked on a college campus for a while in Nashville, Trevecca Nazarene University, and I was going to school there, and they had the mail room, and Miss Paula ran the mail room for many years. She was fantastic, well loved. Her husband Marvin is a worship leader at a church there on Nazarene Church on the campus and everything. But Miss Paula had her, it wasn't really a post office; it was the mail room. But they had the boxes for all the students, and they were still like old school with little dials for the code on them.
Absolutely.
And so the best thing was when you would have to, like, a card where you had to get a package from her or something, and she was so sweet with all the students and everything. But they also handled the mail, I think, too, for the like from the post office that would bring it to the college. She would sort that out, and it would go to different departments. So they had these big like bags, almost like an oversized bank bag, and the mail for the different departments would go in there. And they had an employee with a golf cart, like that was his job, was delivering the mail all over campus.
That's actually what
Yeah.
St. Leo did.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
Their
fun
little golf
stuff.
cart would come over and pick it up. And
College campuses can be a fun place to work. I mean, it's not that there's no work, but it's kind of a little bit laid back. You take a little pride in what you're at because you got your own little community there, and you get to know people from different departments. I had fun when I worked at that college. I was any job I've ever had, I've always tried to be valuable in some way or another, and it's not that it's like trying to outshine other people. It's just always been that's how I work. And so it apparently was noticed, not necessarily by the people that set my pay raises, but by
by the accolades.
by other people. No, like they would call me. We had at the time we had the Nextels for a while, which was the
Oh, I
best thing
remember
ever.
the Nextels. Yes, they
Sprint
do.
bought Nextel
Yes,
after
they
a
did.
bit.
You know what? Just to make fun of that. Well, when I was at Sprint, and we bought Nextel, and it was actually out of Des Plaines, Illinois. So we learned how to talk really fast. Sprint went to hell. May I help you? I'm sorry. No, Sprint Nextel. May I help you? So we used to say, Sprint went to hell. May I help you?
They're like, what'd you say?
I know.
could've
Sprint,
swore.
yeah, I thought you said Sprint went to hell.
Uh,
No, I said Sprint
All right, meow.
Nextel.
All right, meow. Are you saying meow?
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway, I digress.
No, so we ended up, after we were done with the Nextels, which I thought was the best phone ever, especially for like contractor type guys or whatever, because you can hear that little,
Absolutely.
that chirp. You could hear
Absolutely.
it over whatever equipment you were running. And then somebody got the brilliant idea to get these little like stupid flip phones that were terrible. And I think that was, we went to Singular Wireless at the time. That's what it was. And so, um, oh man, now I forgot why I was even brought up the Nextels and all that.
I don't
But
know.
yeah, who
Sorry.
knows?
I
It's
got you
okay.
sidetracked.
Ah, that stuff happened. But it was, oh, I know. I would get these calls from people like on my work phone, my campus phone, and they would call me for, because apparently, all the work phone numbers were on a call list. And so I get these people from different departments that they needed, maybe a bunch of boxes were delivered and they couldn't carry them up the steps or something ridiculous, and they would always call me like, hey Nick, can you help us out with this? And I would do that. I would get all my regular work done through the week, and I would help all these other people. But I remember one day where I thought for sure I was going to lose my job, because it was coming up to it must have been graduation or homecoming, one of the two, one of the like really two largest events on the college campus. And my boss on the grounds crew, I worked on the grounds crew, and my boss was, I don't know, like he just didn't want to get anything done in advance. So he would wait until the week of that big event and like, hey, we got weeds in the flower beds. They've all got to be pulled. We've got to trim all these bushes. We got to pick up all these leaves, like just everything. It's like, are you serious, man? Like, why haven't we been working on this for 2 weeks? And so there's all that pressure going on. And then I have all these people asking me to do stuff. The chef at the kitchen, he needs these 2 giant barbecue grills moved. Well, you got to use a big
Because you
tractor.
got it done.
Yeah, they need this tractor with the forks on it to pick them up, because they're huge. I mean, it would have taken like 6 guys to pick one up. They're massive. And so like I got to move them, and then I got to do this thing, and I got to do that thing. And then my boss is having me do stuff, and then his boss, which is a plant ops supervisor, is calling me for stuff. And that's the guy that I snapped on. He's like, hey, why isn't this thing done? And I just went off. I was like, well, because this and this, like, which boss do you want me to answer to right now? And I just, went off for about a minute, and then he's like, okay. And he hung up, and I was like, oh crap, I think I just lost my job, and so I found him. I did the stuff, and I was like, hey Glenn, I'm really sorry about all that. Like, he's like, nope, I heard how much pressure you're under. I appreciate you getting that stuff done. I was like, oh good.
Well,
But
he probably needed to hear that. Otherwise,
he did.
Yeah.
He really did. And I mean, I was young. I needed to have that under control a little better and like handle it better. But I mean,
We all have those breaking.
no, and the thing is, times like that, we've got to learn, we've got to know how to, say like, okay, I still have to work with or
you.
around this person, and so I want to be able to continue doing that tomorrow. But right now, you need to hear that you can't just expect the world out of me. I'm one guy. And what about my 4 coworkers that are on the same crew as me that aren't doing jack crap? Because they did, And so there were times where I'd be out there working with a cold in the rain, and they're hunkered inside, hiding somewhere where they
And
weren't
that's
supposed
why
to
they
be.
always came to you, because you were the one that
That was
got it
it.
done.
And
Absolutely.
so, I learned one big valuable lesson in those days. One that really sticks with me. There was this one guy that would call me all the time, and he'd always say, hey buddy, I need a favor from you. And I was like, okay, sure. And I'd do whatever thing that needed, because it's for the same team, right? It's all on the same college campus. We're all working to the same goals overall.
Go to the organization.
Yeah. And then I realized finally one time I called him and needed help with something that he was able to work with or help with. Oh man, I don't know, I can't right now, and it was just a bunch of excuses. I was like, oh, one-way street here. I see how it is. And so I just started learning a lot about just human nature and how easy it is sometimes for us to really take advantage of other people, but make it seem like we're friends. And it's really, I'm like, we weren't friends. You know what I mean? Like, I was somebody that was there anytime he needed the help. And we were friends, but I'm saying like it wasn't, those things weren't. I did have a good time. He and I came down to Orlando to help with some relatives of his when those like 3 hurricanes came across, and I think it was 2004 or 5.
It was right before
across
we came
Florida.
out. Charlie, I think that was.
Yeah, Charlie and
Yes.
some of those. I didn't live here, so like it's not burned into my mind like residents at the time were, but he had relatives whose like trees were all over their houses and everything, and so I bumped into him one, like, I think Saturday morning. He's like, what are you doing this weekend? I said, nothing, what's up? And he's like, I'm headed down to Florida, to cut up trees and take generators and stuff. He's like, you want to come? I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah, let's
So
go.
we hopped in his Ford Ranger like an hour later, and we were blasting. We made it from Nashville, Tennessee to Orlando, Florida in just over 9 hours. And that was like, we made 2 gas stops,
Wow.
and one of those stops we called in an order to Sonny's Barbecue that was on that exit, and like picked it up at their walk up or drive through window or whatever, ate it in the truck because we're going 90 something miles an hour down the road in this little Ford Ranger.
Wow.
9 hours flat. Like, it had to have been a record, you know.
Oh, I'm sure.
So it was a good time though. But I love stuff like that, and I think that's where, well, I started loving like kind of the emergency, not emergency services like paramedics and stuff, but just getting stuff
Recovery?
accomplished.
Mhm.
Well, when I grew up in Michigan, we had like snowplow trucks, and so we, you know, Dad would, and then later I had my own. I would plow snow, and that always felt like, hey, we're clearing the way for people to get where they need to go. And so then when I had that hurricane cleanup experience, I was just kind of like, I get to come in here and help these people be able to actually get out of their home, you know, and begin the process of getting the supplies they need to rebuild, you know, and things like that. And so it was exciting, you know, at that time. Like, it was just the adrenaline of it. And I said, I love this, you know. And so I've always, since I've lived in Florida for over 7 years now, I'm like, when people are like, there's a hurricane coming, I'm like,
Ooh, I can't
ooh.
wait.
Yeah, I'm like, I hope it's just a little bit of damage that people can recover from and don't get hurt, but there's something to clean up,
Yeah.
you know? And people don't understand that when I say it, but it's like, I just feel like I'm actually really helping people in a time of big need right there, and I love that. So
Well, and don't want all that big hype and then nothing. We went to the Michigan 400 many years ago, and I don't know if you've ever been to a race without a yellow flag, but it sucks.
oh man, yeah.
Not one. I'm like, would somebody please wreck? Please.
Right.
Crash, hit a wall, bump into somebody or something, because this is the pits. Vroom like this the whole
Yeah.
time. Yeah, so if you don't really want a hurricane, you want a tree to fall down or something.
Now, what's not fun is when it's like the final 2 laps and they keep banging into each other, and then there's another yellow flag for like 16 more
Oh.
laps, and you're like, okay, we were
Yeah,
done.
come on.
We were
Yeah.
done now. Like, can we just,
Can
you
we be
know.
done with this?
My dad took me down to Talladega one time when we lived up
Really?
in Nashville. And I'll tell you, that was a cultural experience. Like, if I was in a college class and they're like, you need one cultural event,
That would be it.
that should have counted. I'm telling you what.
Equal to Woodstock.
Oh my goodness. just first of all,
Wow.
the massive amounts of alcohol that one person could consume was just shockingly large, you know, at that event. And there's this guy in front of me that's got like, he's got this really hairy chest and no shirt on the whole time. Like, he must have been used to this, because he would have been beat red, you know, if he wasn't in the sun a lot like that. But he shaved an 88 into his chest hair.
Oh my gosh.
And so
my gosh.
anytime Dale Jr. is like near the front, he would like get up, he like, with his beer in his hand, get it. And so like, I'm like, okay, man, got it, you know. And then there's this lady sitting right next to me, obviously had some work done in a very low cut shirt.
Okay.
There's this Hispanic guy to the left of the Dale Jr. fan, and when the race is about over, he stands up, and you know how like steep the seating is, so he just stands up, he turns around, snaps a picture of her like 2 feet in front of her, and then leaves. I'm like, did that just happen? No, this is insane over here. And so there was another race after that one too. It was some kind of doubleheader thing, and I'm like, we're not staying for another one, are we? Like, I'm tired.
Oh,
Because we
wow.
drove down and back in the same day. Like we've got to still drive back to Nashville today.
Yeah,
Like,
I've
not
heard
stay
a
for
lot
another
about
race.
the Talladega.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun times though. So here we are. We live in Zephyr Hills, and I don't know the first time I met you. I don't remember that.
I do.
You do? Okay,
Yeah,
tell
I
me.
do, because I got a message. I was at Meals on Wheels,
Uh-huh.
and you had signed up to come do a route,
Okay.
and you didn't come do a route. You had your appendix burst.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
And
early on.
That was the very first time I met you, and so you weren't able to do that, and they said, yeah, he's a local pastor, and at the time Ann was working there.
Okay.
If you remember, you probably remember
Yeah,
Ann, and I don't know, it was a few weeks later, and then here you came,
Then I showed up,
and then you showed
finally
up,
did my
and
route.
yeah. And to
Yeah.
be honest, I was expecting an old gentleman. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, they said that this pastor from the church was coming over, and So that was the very first time that I met you, was there.
Yeah, so my appendix burst on Good Friday. Well, it didn't burst, but I mean it was fixing
On the
to.
verge,
It was
yes.
fixing to. It was on Good Friday, and I woke up that day, and I was like, "Dang you, Pizza Hut that I had the night before." I'm thinking that's what
Oh,
it
yeah.
was, indigestion of some kind. I'm like, "What is this?" Ah. And so the day went on. I ate breakfast. I ate lunch. My parents hadn't moved down to Florida, but they were visiting for Easter, and so I remember we went to lunch with them at the place that was well, it's RJ's Chicken now, fried chicken, but it was a little cafe,
Barb's.
Barb's
Hmm.
restaurant. So I'm like, let's go to Barb's restaurant. And so we went there and we're eating lunch, I'm eating like a club sandwich or something like that. And I'm like, man, this is still like it's getting a little worse, whatever's going on. Like I've never had something quite like this, but it wasn't excruciating. And I'm like, I'm a tough it out kind of guy. I'm like, I don't think I can tough this out. I'm like, if this doesn't go away by the next few hours, I'll go into like, to the um, emergency room or something. So I went in or first I went to the urgent care, and they're like doing all their stuff. They're like, oh, let's take your weight and your blood pressure and all this stuff that they always do. And then they're like, the doctor will be in a minute, and then he's like, okay, lay back. And he's like, does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does it hurt?
Ah!
He's like, that's your appendix, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you got to go to the ER, buddy. And so by I think about 11:30 that night, they'd already finished the surgery. My appendix is out. I'm high as a kite, and like the
Yeah.
nurses are rolling because when they put me on like hospital drugs, I'm hilarious. Okay, and so like no filter, just saying all this stuff, and they're like, he's a pastor too, and all that stuff. Like we should record this. This is hilarious. We'll try to get him on a we'll try to get him someday, and he'll be like, can I have a copy of that? That's hilarious. Like the Indonesian president. Never mind. Anyway, and so I think I think they let me out Saturday afternoon, so I wasn't even in the hospital for 24 hours.
Mhm. Oh,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
was
they kicked
I
you
was
out now.
scheduled to preach the Easter sunrise service at the hospital, and that's something we do like pretty much every year here. It's pretty cool. They've been doing that, and I I had got home, and like my medication wasn't ready at the CVS or Walgreens or whatever yet, and all this. So like the pain's starting to come in. Finally, I get my meds. I take that. I didn't sleep very well that night at home. So about 1:30, I was wide awake. I'm like, well, I missed the walkthrough thing yesterday at where the stage is at the hospital, so I want to see what this looks like and know where I'm going to be in the morning. And so I've got this like cane and I'm walking and I just go up there at like 2 a.m. looking at the
Oh my
stage. There's a
gosh.
security guy there. He's like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, "Oh,
I'm
sorry."
patient. I was just late.
Yeah. Well, I threatened him. I'm like, if you guys don't let me out of this hospital, I will walk out there with my gown and I will preach and I will come back. But so I did that, and then I actually had a funeral the next day for somebody.
Oh my gosh.
And so like that night, I met with his family because I wanted to get like stories from him. I talked with the daughter, who came down. She was actually from Tennessee, but like she was there with her sons and her husband, and I wanted to get a few stories of her dad. I when I do funerals, I make them very personal about that person's life, and then tie it in with a story from scripture and things like that. And I told her, I'm like, hey, listen, like 24 hours ago, I just got out of the hospital, so I need to make this kind of quick. So 3 hours later, they're still in my office telling me all these stories. I'm like, my pain drugs have worn off. I've got to go. And so then the next day, Monday, I'm doing the funeral, burial. And I was like, as soon as this burial's over, I'm going home and I'm sleeping and I'm resting like I should. So that's probably why I missed my shift at Meals on Wheels. But you've really grown that place since then, though. I mean, that Meals on Wheels was in this little building,
Hmm.
not even 2,000 square feet, and doing a lot of good there. But tell us a little bit about your move, about a little over a year ago, right?
Yeah, we did. We were, uh, and that's story is a beautiful God story how that happened. But we just outgrew that other
Yeah.
facility, and we needed.
How long have they been at that facility? Do you know?
You know, Nick, I don't know. Meals on Wheels here in town has been here since 1974,
Yeah.
and I know that we have the paperwork somewhere, and I did see it at one time, but I know that they were at that old building at least 20 years,
Okay.
and
So
probably
for 20
longer.
years, it was big enough, but
Mm-hmm.
you had a bit bigger vision, and
Mm-hmm.
you started working on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that for a reason. I think there's like a principle there that I think is useful for people to hear, and that's, you know, if God's put a vision on your heart, or even if you don't think it's from God, if you're just doing something we started talking about Harriet Tubman earlier, and
Mhm.
just like, if you have that platform and that voice, you should be doing it. And if you're there and you're saying we can do more, sometimes it feels like there's something that, there's always going to be people or obstacles that show up and say, well, we can't because of this. Well, Beth, we can't expand our thing because look how small our building is.
Mhm.
And we're a nonprofit organization that's not funded by the government, right? Like, you don't
Mhm.
receive government funding.
Right.
So how can we possibly think that we're going to grow beyond this building? And yet here you are.
Mhm.
So what, kind of how did that dream start to take place for you to expand to where you're at now?
In all truthfulness, I just continued to pray, and we would pray for God to just open a door, whatever He wants us to do, whatever path He wants us to take. I've always said, if He's going to call you to something,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be obstacles and pitfalls and barriers, but he will always remove those. So if He calls you to something, He's going to remove those obstacles. So I never worried about how or why.
Mm-hmm.
And I never did. I just knew, okay, well, this door is open, so we're going to have to go through it and see what's on the other side. And I do not like the word no. So if somebody tells me no, or I don't think that can be done. And I don't know if it's a defiant way to say, well, I'm going to make sure I get it done, but I believe that there's always a path to accomplish something, not in a defiant way, but I just have I'm able to see visions.
Yeah.
Not, I don't want you to think I'm speaking metaphorically. I have a vision. You know what? We can do that.
I think that's why we call it a vision, right? Like,
yeah.
you can see it, you're going to make it happen.
Exactly. So, if I try this, I think that this is going to happen. So, to kind of give you a idea, when I took over the Meals on Wheels, we got Publix bread every day. That was what our donation was, and that was what we were able to give out and pass out. And that was all we got, was Publix bread every day.
Yeah. And donuts, a lot of those donuts.
Yeah, and a lot of donuts. Now, and I did this report. This report was done 2 weeks ago, which was the middle of May or the beginning of May. We had already received 829,000 pounds of food.
Hang on. We're close to 1 million pounds of food, less than halfway into the year.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you guys don't use all that in
No.
house with your. I mean, you got 160 plus.
We deliver 160 plus meals a day, right? But then we.
But you're a pass-through organization as well.
Yes. So we act as the food bank.
Yeah.
And then every day, a couple food pantries come to us, and then we provide them their food that they take out into the communities and feed our residents. Yes.
Wow.
So
now you do more than just a couple, though. I mean, you supply maybe not every day, but on a regular basis to
about 14
different
food pantries, and we go all the way up to Trilby, Lakuchi area up there.
Yeah. For people outside of this area, Lakuchi is a real name of a town in this community.
Yes, and it's a food desert. They have
a couple gas stations with like crispy fried chicken. And, I don't even think they have a Dollar General.
Yeah, they have a Dollar
General. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and my
about it.
girlfriend used to call it. She worked at the post office with me. And she said, I got to stop at the Lakuchi Mall on the way home. And I said, you got to stop where? And she said, the Lakuchi Mall. And I said, Lakuchi has a mall? She goes, well, no, it's a Dollar General, but we call it the Lakuchi Mall. I'm like, oh my God. Man. So, yeah, but that's all that they have. So they don't have access to any of those other resources. And many of those people up there don't have vehicles and that sort of thing.
And when we talk about a food desert, I mean, it's not that there's zero food around, it's that there's zero healthy food.
It's very,
no fresh food.
Absolutely.
The best you can hope for, like a Dollar General is great for having like a little bit of dairy, some milk, some cheese, some meats, some frozen foods. You can find food where you won't starve.
Yes.
But it's not healthy.
No.
There's no veggies.
Full of preservatives, saturated fats, all sodium is.
I was gonna say canned veggies are barely better than nothing.
I mean, absolutely. So that's what they have access to. Yeah. So it's a blessing to be able, and then we have 2 churches in Dade City that do that as well and are able to reach out and further carry that. So
you guys are going like regular, like every day.
Every day.
You've got a van, you got a refrigerated van, and
And a box truck. Yes.
And you're going to multiple places
Yes.
a day picking up food.
Every single day. Yes. Yesterday we picked up 4,200 pounds of produce.
Good heavens.
And we kept maybe 800 pounds of it. The
Yeah.
rest of it all went to charities,
Wow.
food pantries. And it all, so everything that comes into our facility has to be weighed and sorted.
Yeah, I've helped with that
Yep.
one time.
Yep,
I'm
it gets processed.
I'm
And
not a regular volunteer, but I was there one time. I'm like, well, I'm not going to stand around. I'm going to help carry a couple boxes. And it was just like really neat to see a train of people bringing boxes in, and
they get weighed
weighing
and
them,
sorted, and
then-
it has to go by department
Yeah.
on the store that it comes from, and which store it gets. But we get Wawa, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, Costco, Walmart, Winn-Dixie, the Dollar Generals, Target, Publix,
Yeah.
BJ's.
Man. Save a lot.
We used to, but Save a Lot got new owners, and
Okay.
it was wonderful. We had a huge support system through Save a Lot, but Save a Lot got new owners, and they don't donate anything. They throw it all
Oh,
away, which
wow.
is so heartbreaking.
That's nice.
Because we should not be living in a country where things get thrown away, but we
Yeah.
do.
You know, I think that's one of the things. Excuse me, my throat's been acting up a little. I think that's one of the things that you know, it sometimes it's a matter of where do I donate to. You know, I get a lot of people within the community, or some people even just call our church, and our church line. Nobody's ever like I don't see the point. I'm not saying in all churches, but I'm saying for ours, I don't see a point in paying somebody to just be at a desk all day waiting for people to show up.
Or to call.
Like what was the old Maytag man commercial, like the repairman just sitting there with nothing to do because, you know, and we used to have somebody, and she's still a good friend of mine, but she is, when I came here, she was working there as a like receptionist, administrator, whatever, and really there was only a few hours a week worth of like desk work, office work, and she honestly could have done it from home if she wanted to, except for like things that needed to be printed, like bulletins, things like that. But there were people that wanted to pay her to be there 3 to 4 days a week, so that at any moment, if somebody wanted to come in to talk, they had somebody to talk to. And well, it was, in reality, it was just they wanted a gossip wheel. They wanted a hub of a gossip wheel. And so she was getting frustrated with that because she's like, this is not anything that I want to be part of, but she didn't know how to change it. So I said, oh, I can change that real fast. And so we actually moved her into an office instead of at a receptionist desk, and then changed her responsibilities where that wasn't one of them. And so it worked really well. But, you know, I don't really see much of a point for our church of having somebody kind of there at a desk. I actually set the church phone where it'll just forward straight over to my cell phone so that we don't miss a call that way. I said, there, problem solved. But I get these phone calls sometimes for people that have a donation to make furniture, clothing, whatever, and they just don't know where to donate it. And then, you know, so it's funny how often, you know, when somebody's training to be in ministry as a pastor, they're thinking like, all right, you know, this is what it's going to be all about. You don't stop and think that it might just be taking phone calls telling people where to donate their used couch or whatever, their old wardrobe. But you know, if I can be helpful with that, I will be. But, you know, the other thing I get a lot of calls for, though, is people looking for food. And for some reason, if you go on Google and you type food pantry near me, it like pulls up every church nearby you. It's like, well, I don't know if Google's trying to send us a message that we need to step up our game as a church and like provide that, or if it's just out of ignorance. But it's like our church doesn't have a food pantry. We have a daycare, childcare facility that we can't just have people coming by all the time. And we honestly don't have any storage room. As big as our buildings are, we don't have storage rooms where we could actually house a food pantry. But I know other churches that do, and we've actually worked to support them. And I know that you do that as well with your organization. And it's like, so I know where to send people. So I get these phone calls, and I'm just like, well, hey, go to this place, you know, they'll help with that. And so it's really neat when a community starts working together that way, and starts working to solve, to solve some of those issues, you know, for the people that we have living amongst us. And I think that's how we started our conversation out. Harriet Tubman and things like that. If there's something that you can do, you better do it. And so there's folks like you that have like the dreams, the vision to say, what more can I do? And I think we're probably kind of running about out of time now, but maybe the next time we'll talk sometime a little bit about some of the more specific things that we've got going on in our community. I keep hinting at that. I had our police chief Brewer a few weeks back on here, and we hinted at that, and then said, hey, I got Beth coming in a while. We're going to talk about that, and we still haven't talked about it. So someday we'll talk about the hub network and what that's shaping up to be, and maybe have a few more stories about that. But
And I think that's a great idea because he was actually just in my office today. We had a meeting.
you weren't in trouble, were you?
Well, I tried to pull out my gun. And
Yeah, right. I know better. You don't like guns.
Yeah, no, I don't like guns. But anyway, we're trying to resolve a couple issues that he has on the police force with volunteers, and there's a couple programs that he had that we used to be able to partner with him on, and but it's really about coming together and making these organizations work together, and what can we better do, especially to assist the police, and that's what the hub is all about, and which you and Amy and so many other organizations are such a big part of, is taking care of one another. And, that's not rocket science. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just being human, and we're loving on people.
Well, absolutely. And there's all these organizations that are out there, kind of each one that has a vision and a mission. They know their mission is like, what's the problem and who are the people affected by it that we're trying to help. And their vision is, how are we going to actually do that? But so often it's just, they're siloed out. They're here, I'm working right here, and then there's another silo right here and another one here, and they're not connected at all.
Well, by the way, I have another vision that I'm trying to work on.
Maybe we better talk off screen
we'll
about that.
We'll talk off screen right now, because
Yeah, that's good. That's exciting. You're like me with that. I'm always coming up with like, oh man, what if we did this thing? What if we did this? And I feel like.
But don't you think God puts that on you?
Yeah.
I mean, Scripture says, some are not called to be teachers, some are not called to be preachers, but we have each been given a gift, and whatever that is, use it to the best of your ability. Period. It doesn't matter what it is. If you are the best snowboarder, snowboard. If you're the best tree climber, tree climb. If you're the best BSer, you know what I mean?
I've met a few of those.
I know. I'm married to one. I'm like, oh my gosh, where do you get this stuff? I call it bug mating. It's anything educational I don't need to know about, but he knows it all. It's like, okay, I did not know that, but thank you for letting me know. He cracks me up. So, but that, do what you can do and do it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any one of us that can sit there and say, well, I'm nobody. I don't have any special knowledge or skill or whatever. It's like, okay, but what is it that you're doing? I remember my grandfather, who was never really like a theologian. I don't even remember if he ever even taught Sunday school or anything like that, but he spent his time around, I mean, not all of his time, but he took his family to church. They worked around the church, mowing the grass, doing whatever needed to be done. And one of the things that I remember him talking about was, they would do they had the Sunday school quarterly handouts, things that would come from the Sunday school class, and they would have daily devotions in there, and then you'd bring it with you to class on Sundays, and that's what the lesson was on. And so they would go through their Sunday school paper, curriculum, whatever, devotionals, and that was about it. Like that, I didn't expect Grandpa to get too much like deeper with the theology of Christian faith or anything like that, but every now and then he would find something in his reading of scripture. He would say, and he would try to like come up with an understanding for it. And he said, there's Moses, and God's talking to him saying, you're gonna go free the people from Egypt. You're gonna bring the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses is giving him all these excuses
why he can't.
And I love that too, by the way. This is my 2 cents worth. Moses is like, first of all, he's like, well, but I don't know anything. Well, my mouth doesn't work very well. Well, I'm just this or that. And finally, God has an answer for all those things. Like, who gave man his mouth? All this stuff. Finally, Moses just says, can you just send somebody else? Like, he's got no excuse. Just put someone else. Like, next on the list, please, But so when he's got all these excuses, and this is what my grandpa pointed out, God said to Moses, he's like, what's in your hand? And Moses says, it's a staff. And my grandpa said, if I could write a translation of the Bible, I would just correct a few things. I would say, it's just a stick, because that's really all it was.
Mm-hmm.
He called it a staff because it had a special purpose for shepherding the sheep, and it was a shepherd's staff. But in reality, it's a stick.
A piece of wood, yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I would go out into the woods with my brother. We had this like forest behind our house, and the first thing we'd always do, if we couldn't find one that we leaned up against a tree, you got to find the perfect hiking stick, the perfect walking stick.
Absolutely.
And maybe you get your pocket knife, you carve a little handhold on it, but there's an art to finding the perfect hiking stick. You know, it's got to be just light enough, but just strong enough that it's not going to collapse, like all this stuff. There's a science to it. Anyway, Moses just had a stick. It was a special stick for a special purpose, but it was just a stick. But when he handed it over to God, he's like, okay, you know, now all of a sudden the Bible actually changes it. It says, and Moses carried the staff of the Lord. He allowed God to sanctify that stick for God's purposes. Now all of a sudden it's the Lord's staff. And so my grandpa pointed that out, and that stuck. You know, it really stuck with me all those years since I've heard it. And so whatever you find yourself doing, whether it's running an already well-established organization that's in a smallish building and is doing some good work, but you see a vision that it can be so much more, then when you place that in the hands of God, it can and will be so much more. So whatever it is that you're doing, don't just say, I'm just me, I'm just this little thing. Hand it over to God and see what he'll do with it.
Absolutely. You open up your hand, let go, and watch him fill it up. It's just, yeah. We'll let go of whatever you're hanging on to, and because you can't outgive him.
Right.
And so he'll just continue to fill it up. Yeah. And I'll leave you with this, because I saw it, and it was just absolutely, just very profound for me. But it was, I don't know, about 2 or 3 months ago. But you know how big my yard is, and it's this great big old green yard. And there was the tiniest, I maybe a little bit bigger than a pencil eraser and smaller than that cap, purple flower. And out of that whole yard, you could see this purple flower. And I said, you know, look, you may think how tiny and insignificant that little flower is, but look at the beauty that it creates in this vastness.
And you're seeing it stand out in the midst of the lawn.
Yeah.
You see that
and
one
so
flower.
We often think, I've thought about that for myself. You know, I really don't have anything to give. You know, I'm short, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, I'm whatever. But I'm actually a child of God, and he's called me to be a servant. And so just like that little bitty flower, it probably says, oh my goodness, I'm nothing here. But it's pure beauty. It's pure beauty. So
if my daughter was in your yard, she would have picked that flower.
She would have picked that flower.
She's that kid that could be out there in a, like if she was in a soccer game or something as a little kid, you know, she'd be like looking for a flower on the field and sitting there picking it while the ball's getting kicked all around her, you know.
Little Emma.
But anyway, she loves picking flowers. I'm like, hey, honey, that's a weed. She's like, no, it's a pretty flower. I'm like, well,
see, there you go. It's a weed, but it's a flower.
You can ask
to her.
Jeff. I think I'm right on this. What I learned was that the definition of a weed is any plant material that's growing in a place where it's not desired to grow. Like if you don't want it growing there, it's a weed. So, you know, we think of like lawn weeds. It's like, yeah, but if you've got grass growing in your flower bed, that's a weed too. Like it's not just lawn, it's grass. So anyway, well, hey, listen, Beth, thanks for being here. We'll put some links in the show notes and the show description about, you know, Meals on Wheels, the Genesis Center that you guys operate as part of that.
Yeah, we're having our website redone. So
cool.
They can follow along and check the new changes going on there.
So right on. But yeah, we'll post all that stuff in there and probably a few other little links here and there to some stuff. And
this has been fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Miss Amy.
Yeah, Amy, thanks for
we didn't get any Golden Girl quotes in here.
Not too many.
Can I ask a dumb question? Better than anyone I know. There you go.
There we go. The bad thing is I knew that one. I knew that one.
I'm going to come up with another one.
The one that keeps rolling through my head is quiet, you trash. So anyway.
Oh my God.
All right, folks, that's it. Thanks for tuning in.
Have a wonderful day.
Watching. We appreciate it.